like to call to order the July 18th, 2022 regular board meeting of the State College Area School District Board of Directors. If you could all please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. I'd like to welcome everyone who's here this evening and everyone joining remotely as well. I'd like to announce the board held an executive session June 20th regarding personnel, and prior to this meeting regarding personnel, legal matters, and real estate. Board members, with an agenda before you, are there any changes to the agenda? Laurel?
I wanted to ask that, I believe it's 5N be pulled out of the consent agenda. Thank you.
Okay.
We move to action.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. So- all right. Okay, nothing else? Okay, so with that, then Mr. Johnson is going to now review some of the housekeeping related to our hybrid format.
Thank you. For our audience this evening, 30 minutes will be provided at the beginning of the meeting for public comment for items related to the board business that are not on the action items portion of the agenda. If additional time is necessary, the board may consider reopening public comment after board business is completed or during the next meeting. Each individual will be limited to the comments of up to 3 minutes as time permits for items related to the board business that are not on the action items portion of the agenda. For action items, public comment will be held just prior to voting on that item as required by school code. This approach also allows for comments to be informed by the presentation and board discussion of the respective item. Since this is a public meeting, we will not permit remarks regarding individual students. If you'd like to share something with our board about individual students, please email them. During the meeting, the IT help desk is available. If those viewing remotely encounter technical difficulties, you may email itsupport@scasd.org or call 814-231-7743.
Okay, thank you. And at this time, I'll call on our board secretary for a roll call of board members present.
Dr. Bader.
Here.
Ms. Brandt.
Here.
Dr. Buck.
Here.
Ms. Concepcion.
Here.
Dr. Featherford.
Here.
Dr. Duffy.
Here.
Ms. Sidney.
Here.
Okay, thank you. At this time, I'll call on Dr. Bader to do our retirement recognition. Thanks, Amber.
Darla Sevick is retiring after 26 years with the district. From 1996, sorry, there was a typo and this says to 2991, which certainly we are nowhere near, so apologies. So Darla, from 1996 to 1991, that doesn't even make sense, to 1991. Well, from some period after 1996, Darla was a K-2 instructional paraprofessional at Ferguson Township Elementary School. She then spent the next year in the same role at Matternville Elementary before returning to Ferguson Township to be a K-2 instructional lunch para through the previous school year. Ferguson Township Principal Shelley Buckholz commended Darla for her work, saying, "After 27 years of devoted service to the children of Ferguson Township Elementary School, it is with much appreciation that we wish Miss Darla Sevick many years of happy and healthy retirement. Darla's calm spirit, patience, and support for our youngest learners will certainly be missed by students and our entire school community. Darla's unwavering commitment to the teachers, colleagues, and students is irreplaceable. She not only helped as a classroom paraprofessional, but also covered our lunch block and beyond. Teamwork came very naturally to Darla. Her flexibility and her "I'll do whatever it takes" attitude was evident every single day. Dependable, kind, supportive, and nurturing are words that come to mind when thinking of Miss Sevick. Her presence will certainly be missed in our hallways as she begins this well-deserved next chapter in her life. We wish her all the best and truly hope she stops back to see us on occasion, as she will always be a welcome member of our school family. The board thanks Darla for her service and wishes her the best in retirement.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Johnson, we have a superintendent update?
Yes, I have a few items. Congratulations to the music department for successfully extending teaching and learning throughout the summer with 2 camps offered for the first time this year. Both the choir and cello camps attracted participants from across the district, providing quality instruction and memorable experiences. We have a great video by Nabil from the cello camp on the SCASD website, and I encourage all of you to watch. Thank you to all the staff who organized and ran these camps. You might also recall back in May, we had Park Forest Middle School TSA students at the board meeting to be recognized after the state championships. They recently completed competition at the 2022 National TSA Conference in Dallas, Texas. They continue their run with several national championships. Natalie Brandstetter for STEM, Children's Stories, Melinda Wu, Yur Gao for Technical Design and Challenge, Leah Ling, Ian Lee, and Leah Wang for Website Design. Additionally, Park Forest was national runner-up for Electrical Applications, Data Science Analytics, Technology Bowl Challenge, and Mass Production. The team also took home 3rd places in Video Game Design and Inventions and Innovations. Congratulations to teacher Tim Zirko and all of the students.
Thank you. I also wanted to make a note of today we sent an email from myself and from Chris Rosenblum regarding the efforts of students in our district, particularly a group of Delta students who have been really advising people throughout the community to pay more close attention to safe storage of firearms as certainly a very wise and careful means of preventing accidental or otherwise, preventing potential firearm injuries or deaths. So one of the things that these students have shared with us that was really compelling information was the extent to which simply storing firearms safely and ensuring that children and teenagers do not have unauthorized access or unsupervised access to firearms can make a really significant difference in the number of injuries and deaths, particularly of children. And so we had actually been working with a few of us who are on the board have met with the students a number of times as they've been working on this effort, and they've been discussing the importance of firearm safe storage and how we can communicate that throughout our community with county commissioners, the sheriff, the chiefs of the local law enforcement agencies here in the COG area. They've talked with everyone from child psychologists to pediatricians, county coroner. They've really cast a wide net in terms of who they have spoken to throughout the community to get input on how to effectively communicate this information to families throughout Center County. So I'd really like to recognize their leadership on this effort. Lillian Frank has been really the lead leader of the Students Demand Action Group at Delta and has taken a role with a lot of responsibility on this. So today we sent out an email to parents recognizing the work of these students and ensuring that all families had good information about how to safely store firearms, and also making note of the county commissioners' efforts on this topic as well, because they have also recently passed a resolution at the county level in regard to making an effort to communicate this information throughout the county. So wanted to share that.
And a key piece of that was the availability of free gun locks, no
That's right.
questions asked, at a variety of law enforcement agencies as well as some other community groups.
Yeah. That anyone can walk into a police station, they're not going to ask you why you need it. You can just, go in anytime that they're open and ask, and they're happy to provide those. So,
And
for
they're free.
They're free,
Yep.
yep, exactly. Okay, moving on then to the legislative update. Carlene, do you have any legislative matters to report?
It's Jackie's, because she couldn't be here today, so she sent it to me. Basically, the state had a surplus of $12 billion overall to work with, and the governor had proposed a $1.8 billion increase for education, but the final increase turned out to be $850 million for increase. Well, in that, basic education funding increased by $525 million, and of which State College will be getting a little bit over $1.5 million. In the special education funding, it increased by $100 million. In the career and technology, it's $6.1 million. And in the safety grant for like equipment, SROs, SPOs, that increased to $100 million. Mental health also got $100 million, and the level of funding got $225 million. And that funding goes mostly to the 100 most historically underfunded districts, which State College does not qualify for. What was negotiated to get some of these funding was that there was an increase in corporate tax rate for the Educational Improvement Tax Credit, the EITC, by $100 million. So it gives vouchers, the opportunity scholarships, to approximately 90 students, up from 90,000 students, up from 60,000 students to attend private schools. There's no movement on the charter funding reform. In fact, all of the previous charter funding reform that the governor had signed that was implemented by IRC has now been rescinded to pass this budget deal, so that was not good news. Other notes, the HB 1013 passed. The students who are in industry credentials will appear on students' transcript next year, and I'm glad because that a lot of other states do that. The CTE teacher certification reciprocity will take effect, and that will make it easier to transfer credentials from out of state. And lastly, the governor vetoed House Bill 972, which was the gender rules for school sports, banning participation, and he vetoed that. And this one. The federal government passed the Kids Keep Fed Act, which extended many of the pandemic era waivers through the end of the summer. But they will not be doing that for the school year. So families that qualify for free or reduced lunches will need to fill out the paperwork available for food services to qualify for the program. And lastly, the last day lawyers will be appearing in PA Commonwealth Court for the Ed funding trial will be on July 26th. So ruling could be made anytime after that, and those interested will be able to watch it live stream online.
Great. Good, thank you. Gretchen and Peter, do you have any COG updates?
So the general forum meeting was canceled as well as the public safety meeting. Not enough items on the agenda, but we thought that we would just give a quick update that the SPPA sending out the RFP is sort of on pause because we're waiting for a couple of entities who have recently shown interest to determine whether or not they want to participate. And so it will be sent out in August.
Okay,
And that's all I have for the COG update.
great, thank you. Any other communication items from the board? Okay. So at this time, we have time for public comment. Each individual is allotted up to 3 minutes as time permits for items related to board business that are not on the action items portion of the agenda. Is anyone here looking to make a public comment, or anyone who is joining us via Zoom interested in making a public comment? Okay, seeing.
Oh, can I make one?
Okay, yes,
I just thought, I think that this is Mr. Johnson's first
it is.
official board meeting.
Yes.
And so I want to say welcome, and we are delighted that you are with us.
Absolutely.
But only as a member of the public.
Thanks,
Ditto.
I appreciate that.
Okay, so then we will move on to routine approvals, if that's the end of public comment. And I would like a motion to approve the routine approval listing as presented on the agenda, with the exception of item N.
So moved?
Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Questions regarding routine approvals or discussion? Okay. Any public comment? Okay, we will have a roll call vote on that.
Dr. Bader.
Yes.
Ms. Brandt.
Yes.
Dr. Buck.
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion.
Yes.
Dr. Crevencore.
Yes.
Dr. Duffy.
Yes.
Ms. Sidney.
Yes.
Okay, that item is passed. Item N is a 2022-2023 contract with Jeff Davis of Conversations, Inc., as shown in attachment 5N.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Laurel, did you have some questions on that then? Okay.
Oh, I do.
Oh, okay.
No, when I read this, I'm not the one who pulled it, but I was thinking about pulling it just because I have a question about, in the past, when we have had a contract with this particular consultant service, it has been discussed and by ahead of time, and, you know, we've all been aware, and it's always been for the superintendent. And so this time, I don't remember having a conversation about this happening, and other than for the former superintendent. And it's not even with the superintendent, it's with the finance director. So I was just wondering, did I miss something?
Well, as I recall, I think there was one instance where an assistant superintendent was provided a comparable service, if not this type of service. But there was one instance, at least, I can think of, that there was an assistant superintendent who received these services.
Yeah, I think several,
Yeah.
yeah.
There's
I
at
think
least
both
one I
Will
can
and
think of,
Vern,
yeah.
when they were here,
Right.
had. But I think that, Randy, I think you've been using services from Jeff Davis. This is not the first year, but that's true that normally we had discussed it.
I apologize, I
Yeah,
didn't
that's
realize
okay.
that that was the practice.
That's okay, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm not 100% sure that we actually always had it as an info item
I don't
for all
know.
of them in the past. I don't recall it always
Well, if
being
it's a
that way.
contract,
I
Then-
believe it's been routine approval when it's come forward.
Yeah, I don't,
I mean, I've asked for it to be removed, but I think it's come that way.
who knows?
Yeah,
It could have
I
been
can't
some
remember.
of one and some of the other. I don't know that there's been a strict routine
Yeah.
practice.
so
about it.
moving forward, are we not going to discuss these anymore? We're just gonna see them on the agenda, and there's no need to
Well, I'm not
ask
sure
about
what,
it?
I'm just not understanding what needs to be discussed. If Laurel doesn't have
Well,
any questions
usually
about
when
it.
we discuss it, it is like, I'd say more confidential than I want to talk about right now.
Right, yeah. I think we've had discussions.
But we've had long conversations, and then this time we had nothing. So it was really a difference in previous practice. Amy looks confused.
I just don't agree.
I can talk about the last time we had the conversation. We were at the high school, we were outside, it was part of a contract, it was
Yeah, I don't-
lengthy. I think I was sitting near you.
If there's concerns, table it and move on.
Yeah, no, I don't have a concern. I think that we provide we have in contracts for upper level administrators provided an allotment for them to have executive coaching, for lack of a better term. And we have never, that contract doesn't, I mean, yes, we routinely approve the contract with whoever they choose, but there is no requirement for them to vet that individual with us or.
Yeah, I'm not
No,
talking about a
we're-
requirement, I'm talking about previous practice, what has always happened in the 6 years I've been on the board compared to this time.
Yeah, I think that previously we probably discussed it when it was, certainly when it was a new ad, and
To
my
the
sense is that right
contract.
now it's not a new,
I just remember several
Because it's
conversations
a
where Dr.
renewal.
O'Donnell would come to us and he would say, this is what I'm proposing, this is the justification, this is why I think this is good, this is why I've chosen him. You
So
know, we
can I
would talk
make a
about it.
distinction? I think we've talked about it because the coaching has been part of the contract, and oftentimes the administrator has already.
I guess
Um,
I don't need
can
to
I finish?
dissect what's happened, no, I
I'd
don't
like
think
to
we need to
finish. Yeah,
dissect
hold
what's
on.
happened in the past.
I'd
It's
really
more,
like to finish,
is
Gretchen.
this the current practice now? That's, if it is, then I'm good, we can move on. If it's not, we should table it.
Well, I'd like
and
to make a
then-
distinction because I think it's important.
I think we're wasting time.
Well, you
Okay,
brought up
let's-
the subject, so I'm going to finish my thought because that's appropriate.
I think
You
we
had
need
your
to
chance.
decide if we're going to table it or not.
In the past, it's been an item that's part of a contract, and an administrator has come forward and mentioned that they already have perhaps a service in mind. But in terms of the process, the reason I'm bringing this up is because the process of, the implication, if you want to pull it out and say that we need to be part of the discussion, implies that we want to control who the administrator chooses for coaching. And that really hasn't been our
I
role
think
in the
that's a whole lot
past.
of assumptions that I said nothing about, and I
Okay.
just wanted to know, should we talk about it, or should we say, okay,
I
we
think-
don't talk about this is our practice, we don't talk about it, and I just was misunderstanding that I thought we did talk about it. I'm not saying I have to talk about it, I'm saying this is what's happened for the past 6 years, is it different now? What did I miss?
I
I
think
don't
it's
need
only
to
happened
dissect,
because
and you're
we-
assuming all sorts of
Okay.
things I never
Okay,
said,
okay,
and I
okay.
never
Let's move on.
thought.
Yeah, let's move
move
on.
So
on.
please don't
I
put
would
words
like
in
to
my
call
mouth,
the
Amy.
question.
I-
I would like to call the
Second.
question.
So we need to vote on calling the question.
Yeah, so once it's seconded, you can't discuss anything else. Scott can weigh in on this. You cannot discuss anything else. It is, if there is a vote to call the question, there is no more discussion about this at all, and then we move immediately to a vote. If not, then we can go back into deliberation or discussion or whatever that thing is that was just happening.
Parliamentary question? Is it a majority vote, what is the vote?
Okay,
Thank you.
all right,
Those
so we'll have a
present?
roll call vote at this time.
Ms. Brandt,
Yes.
Dr. Buck,
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion,
Yes.
Dr. Crevapore,
Yes.
Dr. Duffy,
Yes.
Ms. Sidney,
No.
Dr. Bader.
Yes.
Okay. Then we will have a roll call vote on item N. I have to ask for
Public comment.
public comment on that. And I don't see anybody raising their hand, so we'll go ahead and have a roll call vote.
Dr. Buck,
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion,
Yes.
Dr. Crevapore,
Yes.
Dr. Duffy,
Yes.
Ms. Sidney,
No.
Dr. Bader,
Yes.
Ms. Brandt.
No.
Okay, that item has passed. Then moving on to action items. Item A is a motion to approve the final strategic plan for public review. That is seen in attachment 6A.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. I just wanted to kind of frame this a bit, that this is not the final approval of the strategic plan, but this is starting a 30-day review process. right?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay, Laurel?
So, a couple questions. We must do 30 days on the comprehensive plan. Is this to start 30 days on the comprehensive, or the comprehensive and the strategic?
PD requires us to do 28 days
Oh,
on the
28, sorry.
comprehensive plan
Okay,
that we submit to PD.
but
We do not have to do it for the strategic plan that Mutu put forth.
that was because the way the motion was worded is why I'm checking.
Yes.
And because it says final strategic plan, but what we have here as a draft is my other, the strategic plan is labeled as a draft. And that's why I'm asking about that, is the expectation that it is in fact the final.
The PDE language is strategic plan, comprehensive plan or something, isn't it? Doesn't it
Yeah,
have
so-
both words in
so,
it?
yes,
They keep
Mutu
changing
comes
the
up.
name.
They
No,
do, and that's what makes it
It's
confusing.
universal. So we're using for all intents and purposes, we're using what Mutu puts forth with strategic, we're calling that the strategic plan. And then what PDE is asking for, we're calling that the comprehensive plan to distinguish between the two. But the strategic plan is informing our comprehensive plan. So you'll see a lot of the same language in our comprehensive plan.
Peter?
Yeah, and just because all these timelines are a little bit, I think, confusing, and, anyone who, in the public who may be paying attention this evening or watch online, there is in our agenda packet a memo that does explain the timeline. So at the July 26th Culture, Climate, and Learning meeting, there will be, it will be on that agenda. It will be on the August 8th agenda for final review for us. And then it will be on the agenda for approval at the August 29th board meeting as well. So just so that if anyone wants to know what those timelines are, because digging around, I know for myself, this was a very large agenda packet. And so just so that people at home know what the timeline for review is. And I think that I was very pleased to be able to review this and think that there was a lot of good that went into this plan.
Any other questions or discussion? Okay. Laurel?
I actually had a couple of
Okay.
questions. One, this may be a Scott question, Dr. Etter question. We're required to submit these. Are there penalties if we don't, if a district does not meet the deadlines? Or is it one of those things that they tell us to do? Do you know?
I honestly don't know the answer to that. I suspect if you don't submit it, they have some recourse against you rather than just a slap on the wrist, but I've never looked into it, never heard of it.
And then my second question is this sort of like the budget in that we put it out for comment, but we can then take comment in and incorporate that into whatever the final version is that we vote on?
I would assume so. I
Correct.
don't see why you wouldn't.
Okay.
That's the purpose
So
of
that
it,
people,
too.
okay, so people do have the ability to comment, and I, you know, in the past when we've done this, we haven't exactly gotten a whole lot of comments, but I still think that, and it may be something we can talk about in communications, that it would be nice if there were a place where people can see this, where they can easily submit comments. I think we don't often make it easy for people to do that, because I think one of my big concerns with this has been, and it shows up both on the strategic plan part and on the list in the comprehensive plan, they're not exactly the same, the people who are involved, because there are different components of it. But I'm concerned about the lack of participation by people whose lens is supposed to be parent. And I put it that way because many of our teachers and staff members are parents, but it's like when I sit on something, I sit as a board member, even though I'm a parent. There may be other things I sit on as a parent, and I'm very concerned about not having had enough opportunity for parents to volunteer and participate in the process. So I think in this 30 days, the more we can do to make sure that people know about it, are able to see it, and are able to share comments would be a very good thing. And community members too. This actually, compared to previous plans, has far fewer community members who are not affiliated with the university. I don't know that there are actually any.
So do you think, because it's posted on the board agenda, maybe it would just be helpful to have a link? I think we have there's a strategic planning page that we have, so if it's posted there, maybe just some instructions for who to send feedback to. It could just say,
That could be good.
you know, I don't know if it should come to the board or if it should
So-
come to the administration.
Just so we're on record, if you have any type of feedback on the plan for the community, our directions would be to have you email our assistant superintendents, Chris Merritt or Danielle Yoder, with those particular comments. And they will.
So for somebody who is watching at home and they're thinking about reviewing this, other than looking at it in terms of the information provided this as part of the agenda this evening, if they were to walk back and try to find this on the website, could there be a button or click, basically a way for them to access it there with suggestions, including suggestions for contacting the assistant superintendents that you just described, Curtis? I'm thinking out loud that in terms of the communication side of this, if there's a way to make it accessible for
Yeah,
people
I
in
would
general to
rather
do that.
in-person contact because both of those documents are pretty lengthy. And to get the correct context that we would want, and so that we understand the feedback. And like I said, we'll have it at the CCL that we can have conversation. It will be posted again then. And then the August 9th is also going to be posted as well. So there's going to be many times for people to view it and see it.
Do you think maybe, like, we could just add a line to the, on the memo that just says, you know, to submit feedback, please get in touch with the
Yes.
Assistant Superintendent's office?
Yep.
Yeah, I can add that for future
Oh, that would be great, thank you. Okay. Are we ready to take a vote on that?
And I'm sorry,
Okay,
just to
sorry.
clarify, I didn't remember this step before, but we may have done it. We have to actually, as a board, vote to put it out there for review, or are we voting that we
Yes, you're
agree?
voting to start the review process.
Okay, and that is something that we're required to vote to do?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. All right, is there any public comment? Okay, then we will have a roll call vote.
Ms. Concepcion.
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore.
Yes.
Dr. Duffy.
Yes.
Ms. Sidney.
Yes.
Dr. Bader.
Yes.
Ms. Brandt.
Yes.
Dr. Buck.
Yes.
Okay, that item has passed. Moving on to item B under action is a motion to approve the 2022-2023 Central Pennsylvania Institute of Technology student attendance request shown in attachment 6B.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Questions or discussion?
I have a question.
Yes.
This seems like a larger number of students than we've had for a number of years. I know there were some times it didn't show up because we had something we were working on. Do you have any sense of why that might be?
We
It's all
have,
based upon student
Okay.
interest, sorry.
yeah, it is based on student interest, but we have had a number of students come into the district already attending those programs, and so when they come into our district, we have to provide.
Okay, I wondered if it maybe, thank you.
This is a practical question in terms of scheduling and so on. So these students will be going, I think, in the morning to CPI, and then coming back here in the afternoon, or vice versa. Yeah, so,
Depends on the program that they're in
right,
and
so,
when that's offered.
so that might require some creative scheduling for their core classes, for math and science and social studies and so on, English.
Okay. Okay. Is there any public comment on this item? Okay, we'll have a roll call vote then.
Dr. Crevecore.
Yes.
Dr. Duffy.
Yes.
Ms. Sidney.
Yes.
Dr. Bader.
Yes.
Ms. Brandt.
Yes.
Dr. Buck.
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion.
Yes. Okay, that item is passed, and item C is a motion to approve the 2022-2023 James Daniel and Associates CTE Professional Development Training as shown in attachment 6C.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Questions or discussion? Any public comment? For those who have joined, since we read the instructions about public comment, you can use the raised hand feature in Zoom if you would like to make a public comment. Okay, we'll take a roll call vote then.
Dr. Duffy.
Yes.
Ms. Sidney.
Yes.
Dr. Bader.
Yes.
Ms. Brandt.
Yes.
Dr. Buck.
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion.
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore.
Yes.
Okay, that item is passed. Item D is a motion to approve the 2022-2023 Max Teaching CTE Professional Development Training as shown in attachment 6D.
So moved.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Any questions or discussion on this item? Okay, any public comment? Okay, we'll have a roll call vote.
Ms. Sidney.
Yes.
Dr. Bader.
Yes.
Ms. Brandt.
Yes.
Dr. Buck.
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion.
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore.
Yes.
Dr. Duffy.
Yes.
Okay, that item has passed. Item E is a motion to approve 5-year arbitrage calculation for the 2017 bonds as shown in attachment 6E.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Okay, any public comment? Okay, we'll have a roll call vote.
Dr. Bader.
Yes.
Ms. Brandt.
Yes.
Dr. Buck.
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion.
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore.
Yes.
Dr. Duffy.
Yes.
Ms. Sidney.
Yes.
Okay. Item F is a motion to approve the Plan Con H for submission to PDE as shown in attachment 6F.
So moved.
Second.
That's been moved and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Any public comment?
This is quite an artifact of the past. I mean, of the era in which it was developed.
Yeah, unfortunately, Plan Con funding is no longer, coming forward.
Right.
So.
What, microfilm?
Yep.
But the next one's
Okay.
developed too, so.
Is there any public comment? Okay, we will have a roll call vote then.
Ms. Brandt.
Yes.
Dr. Buck.
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion.
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore.
Yes.
Dr. Duffy.
Yes.
Ms. Sidney.
Yes.
Dr. Bader.
Yes.
Okay, that item has passed. And moving on to another relic from the past.
Well, that was
Yeah.
my reference,
typewriter.
actually. I was at the long point in my
Yeah.
list, sorry.
Okay. I thought you meant Plan Con funding was a relic of the past.
That is relevant
Yeah.
at this point.
Yes. So item G is a motion to approve the cancellation of the tennis court agreement with State College Borough. This is shown in attachment 6G.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Questions or discussion?
As
Yeah.
this was actually passed on my actual date of birth, we should definitely get rid of it.
So it is an artifact.
Does this mean, because this says the district has exclusive use at some times, and the borough has exclusive use other times. When we get rid of this, is it ours entirely? Okay. I just wanted to make sure that it wasn't the other way around.
I'd just like to correct one part of
Oh,
your
sorry.
statement. The district owned at the time and still owns the tennis courts. The agreement, as it was written, allowed the district to have a limited amount of time where it was available to the school, the tennis courts were available to the school district. The borough technically had access, but they gave that access to Center Region,
Parkson.
well, what was in existence before Parks and Rec. It was
Predecessor.
Recreation Authority, yes. So does that,
Yeah, I just
Help.
wanted to make sure that it wasn't going the other way, that we weren't somehow forfeiting the district's right to using it.
okay.
That was
Yeah,
all I
I would
was
never
making sure.
recommend that.
I just wanted to make sure that I understood it correctly. I didn't think you would, I just wanted to make sure that that's what the default was back to. Thank you.
As a throwback, I appreciated the 10:30 cut point for lighting. It's too bad we couldn't bring it up into the present.
Right? Okay. Any public comment on this item? Okay, we will have a roll call vote then.
Dr. Buck,
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion,
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore,
Yes.
Dr. Duffy,
Yes.
Ms. Denney,
Yes.
Dr. Bader,
Yes.
Ms. Brandt.
Yes.
Okay, that item has passed. Item H is a motion to approve engagement with Mullen Coughlin LLC for cybersecurity as shown in attachment 6H.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Questions or discussion?
I just wanted to thank the people in the IT department who I know have been doing an incredible amount of work on this and other things in terms of, we read so much out there, and I know it has just required an awful lot. And I appreciate getting things like this so that we can know that we are moving ahead and protecting our students and their information, our staff and their information.
Yep. Any public comment? Okay, we'll have a roll call vote.
Ms. Concepcion,
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore,
Yes.
Dr. Duffy.
Yes.
Ms. Denney,
Yes.
Dr. Bader.
Yes.
Ms. Brandt.
Yes.
Dr. Buck.
Yes.
Okay, that item has passed. Item I is a motion to approve the excess payment beyond the 2021-2022 HER Clinic agreement. This is shown in attachment 6I.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Questions or discussion?
I have so many tonight.
Okay.
It's, this is in the items that were in excess of the supervision. Does that mean that this is for the hours that were actually spent directly with engaged with students because of crisis issues? Or what exactly was this?
Yeah, it was actually last summer in developing the infrastructure for this year. She did that some hours in August, and it was an oversight on our part of bringing that forward sooner.
Oh, okay.
And that's why I know that the contract for this coming year was a bit more, and that's what that was, when it says that's included, that's what that is for. Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any public comment on this item? Okay, we will have a roll call vote then.
Dr. Crevecore,
Yes.
Dr. Duffy.
Yes.
Ms. Denney,
Yes.
Dr. Bader.
Yes.
Ms. Brandt.
Yes.
Dr. Buck.
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion.
Yes. Okay, so that item has passed. And item J is a motion to approve the Memorial Field Sound Project change order as shown in attachment 6J.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Any questions or discussion?
Yeah, I have a
Peter,
question.
yeah,
It's a sort of generic question. That's about like a change order protocol. What is the minimum threshold for the board to review a change order? Is there a, because this is, I mean, it's not $164. I'm not saying $964 is nothing, but it's pretty small. Like, why wouldn't this be in a different part of the agenda? Do you
It's a
know?
change order to a project, so I made it an action item, so you're aware of all change orders. And it's also in the table down below.
Okay.
So we keep,
Sure.
it's tracking all of these change orders for you.
Okay,
I appreciate
And I have to sign all of the change order contracts?
got it.
So since I have to sign them,
Yep.
then you have to vote on them.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that just,
That's a better answer.
No, it's very, but it's very helpful. I just wanted
Yeah.
to, because it's not very much money, but I
Right.
really appreciate the table and everything that goes into it. It's always detailed. I know where everything falls, and so that's just very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, and this way you know what I'm signing.
I do.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, that's Amber.
Yeah, I really appreciate the table. It makes it really convenient to look at everything and how much we're spending.
Yep. Really helpful. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, we'll have a roll call vote on that item then.
Dr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Sidney?
Yes.
Dr. Bader?
Yes.
Ms. Brandt?
Yes.
Dr. Buck?
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion?
Yes.
Dr. Crevefort?
Yes.
Okay, that item has passed. Item K is a motion to approve the North Team Rooms project change order. This is shown in attachment 6K.
So moved.
Okay,
Second.
that's been moved and seconded. Questions on, yes, Laurel?
I probably should have asked this back in April. But I got to thinking about this and the whole north renovation, and when we were talking about renovations earlier in the facilities meeting, and I went back and looked, and I found that we did, in fact, when we did the high school project, approve and add alternate, or an alternate item that was some renovation of locker rooms in the north. And I think that's what had been digging in the back of my mind of not quite understanding this. So I was wondering if at some point we could get sent to us just a sketch of what we're talking about, because we already approved the project. I certainly take your advice on what needs to get done, but I'm really not sure how this differs from what we did before and where
These
we're
are-
talking about.
Different rooms. These are the team rooms, not locker rooms. They're separate rooms altogether.
But it is still the old part, it's not the new.
It is. It's the athletic
Yes.
facility, yes.
Okay. And one other thing, the word curb in here, I assume is, it sounds like it's something inside. It's not what I think of as a curb?
Correct. There was a 4-inch curb, or basically a slab with framing lumber integrated with it. The locker sat on.
Okay,
We didn't know what was under the lockers.
okay,
So if the concrete looked nice, we were going to finish it, paint it, and it would look like part of the room. So we chose to repurpose the lockers instead of buying new lockers. So, but we found that the curb was not aesthetically pleasing. So we have to remove it, and then we'll end up with a flat floor then, that'll be refinished in that area.
but the lockers were successfully removed,
Correct,
repurposed, or whatever.
correct,
Okay.
correct. We had beautiful lockers in the one team room that the athletics that weren't getting used, so we repurposed them instead of buying new.
That's fantastic. Thank you. I really can't wrap my head around where we're talking about in the building.
I'd be happy to give you a tour.
I may take you up on that. Thank you.
We join you.
Thanks. I think, yeah, actually was thinking it might be with some of the discussion we have in the next part of the agenda, that it might be helpful to have our next facilities meeting at the north building perhaps.
That'd be great.
So, yeah. Okay. Other questions on this?
Chair,
Any
okay with that?
public comment? Okay, let's have a roll call vote then.
Ms. Sidney?
Yes.
Dr. Bader?
Yes.
Ms. Brandt?
Yes.
Dr. Buck?
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion?
Yes.
Dr. Crevefort?
Yes.
Dr. Duffy?
Yes.
Okay, that item has passed. So now we have a motion to approve the Easterly Parkway lighting change order as shown in attachment 6L.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded, so questions or discussion on this item? Okay, any public comment? All right, we will have a roll call vote then.
Dr. Bader?
Yes.
Ms. Brandt?
Yes.
Dr. Buck?
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion?
Yes.
Dr. Crevefort?
Yes.
Dr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Sidney?
Yes.
Okay, that item has passed. Item M is a motion to approve the Easterly Parkway elevator project change order as shown in attachment 6M.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Questions or discussion on this item? Okay, any public comment? All right, we'll have a roll call vote then.
Ms. Brandt?
Yes.
Dr. Buck?
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion?
Yes.
Dr. Crevecoeur?
Yes.
Dr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Sidney?
Yes.
Dr. Bader?
Yes.
Okay, that item has passed. Item N is a motion to approve engineering for the north building heating system. This is shown in attachment 6N.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Questions or discussion? Okay, any public comment? All right, we'll have a roll call on this item then.
Dr. Buck?
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion?
Yes.
Dr. Crevecoeur?
Yes.
Dr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Sidney?
Yes.
Dr. Bader?
Yes.
Ms. Brandt?
Yes.
Okay, that item has passed. Item O is a motion to approve the Mount Nittany Middle School water heater project change order shown in attachment 6O.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Questions or discussion? Public comment? Okay, we'll do a roll call vote.
Ms. Concepcion?
Yes.
Dr. Crevecoeur?
Yes.
Dr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Sidney?
Yes.
Dr. Bader?
Yes.
Ms. Brandt?
Yes.
Dr. Buck?
Yes.
Okay, that item has passed. Moving to the last item, under action, item P is a motion to establish, authorize, and approve additional schools, departments, and programs under the PA School Code as shown in attachment 6P.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Any public comment? Okay, we'll have a roll call vote.
Dr. Crevecoeur?
Yes.
Dr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Sidney?
Yes.
Dr. Bader?
Yes.
Ms. Brandt?
Yes.
Dr. Buck?
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion?
Yes. Okay, so that item has passed. Moving on to information discussion, I think we'll have Mr. Johnson and Ms. Knaus providing an update on the school district's health and safety planning for the upcoming year. This is shown in attachment 7A. So thank you. 3 years in a row with this now, right?
Last year. This is
Doesn't
it.
feel as stressful as usual.
No, it doesn't.
Right?
I don't want to have flashbacks to the summer of 2020 discussing this.
Right. Okay, well, you have a copy of the plan in front of you. I guess
We
I'll just
do.
entertain any questions. Is it on?
I'm not sure.
It was.
Okay.
Just gotta lean in.
I'll speak louder. Thanks. Amy always gives me the thumbs up.
Sorry.
No, I appreciate that. So, you've seen it in front of you. We've made minimal changes. We looked mostly at the mass kind of concerns that we've had and try to put more clarity around that. And the health and safety team supported those thoughts and provided us some further guidance and information. So if there's anything you would like to ask about that, I'm happy to.
Peter?
Yeah, thank you very much. I know pretty recently, I think I had communicated with you all about the possibility of someone, a psychologist, child psychologist or an adolescent psychologist being a permanent fixture on the Health and Safety Committee. And I do see it. I don't want to say that I don't want to give anyone the idea that there is somehow not counseling services involved with these decisions.
Right.
But as part of the core team, can you tell me a little bit about your thinking around that?
Well, sure. So we have a lot of contracts now with some child psychologists. So I have some accessible at my fingertips. We were kind of pulling back more instead of pulling in more with the health and safety team. And so to ask or reach out to that didn't seem like appropriate in that we're getting our team getting smaller instead of larger. That said, I do have access to psychologists to definitely consult with all of this. I know Mike Wolf sits on our health and safety team for the district. Peter Montmany's there. I also have access to Katie Costoris and those resources. So it's definitely something we'll consult along the way to be a permanent part of the team. I mean, it's not a big deal to invite them in. We're not going to be meeting as regularly as we did last year. We're looking at standard meetings 4 times a year and then as needed, depending on situations. And so it's not a problem. It just didn't seem like the time to do it, if that made better sense.
Yeah. There were a few members of the community, some of them are themselves mental health professionals who had a lot of concerns, and I don't want to get into concern trolling about all kinds of things. So I'll just leave the specific concerns off the table, but they thought that, you know, there could be some decisions that, or at least the communication about the decisions could have been different from a mental health standpoint, and I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
I appreciate the response, yeah.
Yeah, I think I think it is a good question though, since we are seeing so much of what our efforts need to be around health and safety in regard to the pandemic recovery is around. But it's fortunate we do have access to folks like Michael Wolf and Katie Kostouris on a regular basis. Like anything they're able to help, you
Right,
know,
for sure. And they're
provide
in the
input
buildings,
on.
so they're.
Right, I was going to say they're
Yeah.
working with our students.
Right.
So they're really familiar with what's going on
Right.
day to day.
And I'll be meeting with them weekly.
Mm-hmm.
So I will be able to have that information to be able to utilize. And I do not hesitate to pull anybody into a conversation if I think they're going to lend a perspective that we need to have at the table.
Gretchen?
So, sort of structure-wise, I was wondering what was going to happen moving forward, and you just said to Peter, you know, we're wanting to, you know, meet less frequently and then not add people. And so is it, how many people now are on the safety team? Does the safety team still exist? What's the lifespan prediction for the safety
Yeah,
team?
right.
I mean, I'm just wondering, you know, just sort of organizationally as a structure, you know, trying to picture what is it now? And then also, just sort of what have the conversations been behind, you know, those decisions? Is it more like this is how we live now because COVID's not going anywhere? Or because it isn't going anywhere, this team still exists? Or I'm just curious, you know, what you all have been talking about.
Right. So the team hasn't changed much. It basically consists of cabinet members, myself, a school nurse, and then the three outside people, Matt Ferrari, Joy Dress, and Allison Huggins. And we've met every Thursday throughout the year, and we haven't met over the summer. Our first meeting was last week, and I think we met once at the beginning of the summer to kind of talk about some processes. It's really nice to have the balanced approach because I feel like Matt really keeps us abreast of, hey, it's not over, it's still out there, and Joy leaves that approach where, yes, and we got to learn how to live with this and figure out how things to get along. So we really have a great relationship where we challenge each other, we discuss things that are of concern. We discuss things that we see on the horizon, and we know what's going on in Italy and Europe, and so it really stays. It's really a really good. Good isn't a good word. It's very collegial. It's very nice committee to meet with, and they circle up whenever we need them. If we have a case on that morning, I will say, is anyone available at 11? And they all three get on. I don't know a time that they haven't to at least pop on to hear what we have to say. They're very responsive through email. They're very responsive through Google Meets. They don't leave us hanging ever.
And by the way, they're just volunteers,
They're
right?
just volunteers, and they have volunteered so much time.
Yeah, they have.
I mean, I wasn't kidding when I was saying the first year I didn't have a weekend or a vacation or an evening that wasn't bombarded with something with COVID, and they were there every step of the way.
Sorry.
Oops.
Sorry.
Yeah.
My computer
So,
fell
and
asleep looked back.
they were there, I mean, we were on Google Meets probably sometimes for 4 and 5 hours, waiting for results and talking through what we were going to do, and so it's I feel like they've really been with us through this whole process, and they have steered us in the right direction every step of the way, so I have a lot of confidence in what they've done for us.
And talking with superintendents across the country, county, and talking to our safety team, they're thinking that this is something that we're always going to have. it might not be the pandemic, but there will be other scenarios or situations that we would need to call on a health and safety team to come on board to help us with making decisions. So I think it's good that we have people in the community that are willing to volunteer and come forward to help us out in making these decisions. As far as the plan, we're trying to meet ESSER requirements so we can get the funding for those type of things. But we're trying to come up with a plan that meets all our scenarios as much as possible so that we don't have to constantly guess or come to a meeting to figure out what the next steps are. We're been through this a couple of years now, and we've learned from what we have done so far, and we're hopefully come up with a plan that will help us for this school year at least. So we'll revisit in 6 months. We have to do another health safety plan to be approved to meet ESSER funding requirements. So.
And the ESSER requirement only goes till next September, so hopefully they have a vision of not this being a requirement anymore, right? That we kind of get to a place where we're thriving.
Yeah, maybe eventually we arrive at some kind of new normal that's,
Right.
yeah. Laurel?
There's some mention in here of transportation and that changes, you don't need to wear a mask when no one's in there and all. What about windows? Because keeping windows open, are we still, what else are we doing? There's the bare minimum, but what, are there things that maybe aren't in here, but that in fact we're going to try to make good practice, or?
Right, I think the red, yellow, green light window stages, and I'll look back to Randy on that. That was never in our health and safety plan, but it was something we created for communication, so we didn't have those freezing cold days with wind and rain blowing on kids. And I think that is good practice, and that we will continue that.
Okay.
It seemed to be appropriate and work well. It's same as ventilation. It's kind of like our ventilation in the buses as opposed to in the classroom.
And I realize this is the health and safety piece of it, but given that part of the health and safety is that sometimes people are not able to come to school, have we, or when will we talk about the ability of students who are medically fragile to still be part of our school, some type of virtual or whatever? Is that coming later this summer? It's not really this, but I don't know where it is.
So we did complete the mitigation easement plans with a bunch of our students last year who were medically fragile so that they could come to school. And so that was really writing a plan that they created where they would be masked and people around them would still continue to mask. And that's something that we're still going to implement.
Okay.
I think most of our students are back. There may be some that are still at home, but for the most part, our students have been coming back.
But we do have the ability, if there is a special need of a student, to.
Yep.
And I think that's important that people know because, I mean, we have to protect students' confidentiality, but it's also important to have options for them.
Right,
if
and we
they
have
really can't be there.
that's part of the process that we're going to present to administrators, following up with their easement plans and making sure those students are in a good place, either continuing it or discontinuing it based on where they are, the family is.
And we're continuing to offer the elementary virtual academy as an option, right? Okay.
Okay, it wasn't in here, that's why I wondered. I saw
I
it
thought
as
that might be what
secondary.
you were getting at, okay.
I'm sorry, gotcha.
We're working with SCAE on creating another virtual MOU, which will be coming to you as soon as we finish that and complete that. We do have 4 part-time teachers that we have hired for virtual, or going to be hiring for virtual, at least at the secondary, and an assistant principal part-time to also help with the running K-12 virtual program.
Thanks. Gretchen? Or Dan?
Great question. Sometimes as these systems continue, we can get into ways of habits, if you will, in terms of making decisions about kids and such and programs and such. And I'm just, I think I know what the answer would be to this question, but I'm wondering out loud, if there are students who are medically fragile, for whom we have concerns in the family, we need to be concerned about their risk in terms of being involved around situations which present risks for infection and so on, which might have more severe consequences for them. Do we have a protocol that by which we can actively set up mitigation systems for those kids to be sure they can come to school, even if they're at risk? In other words, we can provide for those. In other words, if a family chooses they want their son or daughter to opt out of concern regarding infection, we can set them up in the virtual academy or do something like that. But if they are seeking, and if we are actively inviting them, their son or daughter to return to school, we can set up systems to support those students at school.
Right, we need to have documented medical concern,
Right.
and then we need to be able to do it, right? There's
Right.
only a few things we can do, but we do
Right.
provide the masking of the adults by them, the masking of the student, you know, if it's a personal transportation by van, or
Right.
we can, you know, the students on there can mask while they're on there, depending on the fragility, if that's a word, of the child. Yep.
So we've just learned, I think, out of, for the last, if we've learned anything among things we've learned the last couple of years is about the downsides, the negative side effects of
Right.
exclusion. And to the extent that we can actively engage those kids, that we have the systems by which we will reach out to those families and assure them we can provide for their
Yeah,
son or
we
daughter.
spent a significant amount of time in the spring here when we went to no masking,
Right.
or mask optional, and we spent a significant amount of time meeting with those families and developing those plans.
I
So
remember
they're
that.
in place,
Yeah.
and that's what we need to follow up on. Are we in a good place, or we want to discontinue that, revise them, change them, or keep them going?
So, but that's essentially the protocol. That's
Yep.
what we do. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Danielle, I see your hand raised.
I wanted to talk to that a little bit with regards to elementary. Our principals of our special needs students who aren't back yet, they have called those parents this summer and worked with Heather Pringle as well to say, what can we do that even if they can come in a little, but we can do those protective services like Dan were talking about. So we are in the process of still offering virtual, but for those students that have specialized needs due to safety, we're trying to look at what else can we do so that they can keep an in-school experience, but at the same time be safe. So I just wanted to let everybody know that we really were doing that in our buildings that have our most, I would say, immunocompromised students with the highest risk factors.
Thanks, Danielle.
Thank you, Dave.
I had a few questions. So is the plan as written here is a lot less detailed than in previous years. So I'm wondering, to the great extent, is it generally sort of a status quo from how we were operating in the spring moving forward? Because most of what I'm seeing here now is not a change from how we were operating in the spring, except I do appreciate that we also are going to have in our layered prevention strategies, have times when we might say masks are highly recommended, and I think that's really helpful in terms of informing people about increasing risk during periods of, potential increases. But in general, should I assume that unless something's being addressed here as a change, that we're generally moving forward with the same level of mitigation? Like, for example, I know ventilation systems have been tuned to do the best we can there. And so we're continuing that as is. Reporting of cases that's similar. So am I essentially on the right track?
You are. I'm
Okay.
confused. Did you first say where it is complete, it is different, or it is the same? That's where I was
I'm
headed.
sorry, I was trying to get at, should I assume that in general, this plan is the same as how we were operating this past spring?
Very close. We
Okay.
didn't make very many changes. We updated the sections on the front to talk about what we were doing for learning loss. And then we put some clarity and explicitness around the masking mandates and
Right.
around when we would mask and talk about doing that. And the rest pretty much stayed the same. There were little details that we removed or revised, but for the most part, yeah. That's the kind of the shell that the framework they gave us for ESSER. And so we needed to.
Figured you were working with a template from them.
Correct.
Yeah. So I did have a question about isolation, because it doesn't address isolation specifically, at least that I could find. Are you going to use the same isolation guidelines
Yep.
when you have a positive case?
Yep.
And just
Yeah,
moving forward with the CDC recommendations,
Yep.
however those?
Yep, it's actually linked in there, the form that, so when the parents
okay,
fill
yeah.
out the form, and we need to do that once we have the updated form for the next school year, and I already spoke with Nabila about that. We need to update the form. Once they put that in, they'll get a bounce back email that will have all the
good.
guidelines to follow and how to
Great.
identify your close contacts.
Good, okay. Yeah, and so one of the questions I had too is related to that in regard to testing, because I think we've all seen over the past couple of months that frequently now people are having symptoms for several days before a test turns positive. So it really creates a challenge compared to where we were last year when, before we got into the Omicron surge, we were pretty much able to bet that if somebody had symptoms and they were negative, and the test came back negative, they probably had something other than COVID causing the symptoms, and that's not the case anymore now, correct? So now, and my understanding of this is that it's partly because this is no longer such a novel virus, our immune systems have been exposed to it somewhat, so we're starting to kick up symptoms more quickly in response to exposure to the virus, but it hasn't replicated enough to come up with a positive test at that point. And I don't know that we have clear understanding of how contagious people are when they're symptomatic but not yet testing positive. So I guess my question is, how do we communicate this to families who have symptomatic kids who might be testing negative?
Right. We'll definitely put a communication out there, and I think it would be a cautionary that we recommend if you're symptomatic, you stay home. We say test on day 6 is what we're recommending. So day 5 is when you can test, but we're saying before you come to school on day 6.
Oh, do you mean in terms of exposure or symptoms?
Oh, symptoms.
Yes, I'm
symptoms
thinking
if
like
they're
kids who are
symptomatic.
like actually
Yeah.
having symptoms.
Yes.
Yeah, to
Yes.
stay home.
Yes, that's the advice, is stay home with all symptoms.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because
that
they'll be
makes
sent
sense.
home.
Yes.
Our
Yeah.
nurses will still triage that.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah. Peter?
Yeah, so the indoor masking requirement says that mask mandates will only be considered if also mandated by local municipalities. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, that kind of was something we talked about at the end of the year when we did the mask mandate. It was something that we were advised was not as effective because no one was masking outside of the school. And so that's what we're, to initiate a mask mandate that would be a mandate for everyone. Now, if it's a classroom, we'll mandate a masking for like we've done with 5th grade or different classes in that capacity, or with different groups. But that was something that was really tricky that occurred at the end of the year last year, and we were trying to find a way to navigate through that, and thought that process made more sense.
Okay, so I don't know that I need an answer to this sort of scenario right now, but let's just say that Ferguson Township and State College Borough both passed a mask mandate, right? But the rest of the municipalities don't. So you would have the 2 most populous, and then you have the other 4, Half Moon, Harris College, Patton, not doing it. I mean, I don't know.
Yep.
Would
The answer
you
to
guys-
that would be, it would depend on the spread in the schools. So if we're seeing the spread in the schools too, then we're going to make sure that all are masked. So it's to trigger that. If they're mandating masking outside of the municipalities, it's probably in a capacity where the spread is really critical, and we need to stop that. And so I believe that we would talk and see look at our case counts and
Great.
discuss in our health and safety team. We'd probably circle up right away and say, our numbers aren't going up, but they're doing these mask mandates, and that's what the kind of conversations we would have. Or our numbers are going up, they have the mask mandates, it's time to effectuate that. So.
And then in terms of we have the participation in the regional health, or the regional safety committees, right? So that would all be communicated live, like in real time?
Are you talking about the Penn State, the committee that we with Camp Penn State?
Yeah, so there's Penn State, the COG, et cetera, et cetera.
The IHPG,
Yep.
yeah, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sure Sean Kaufman would
Yep.
definitely circle up and want to do something right away.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
I had a follow-up question to Peter's as well, but if
Oh,
yours
go
is on
for
a
it.
different topic.
Mine's
Okay.
different.
Okay. So to make sure I understand what the conditions are, we would do masking if we may not, like there could be a scenario in which the CDC transmission levels would be high, but because you were not seeing as much in schools, you might not at that point go to required masking unless local municipalities were also doing so. But we could be in a scenario where we're seeing more like spread throughout our schools that we might say, because we're seeing so much spread in schools, we're going to be doing masking either district-wide or on a school-by-school or class-by-class basis.
Right. The class by class is pretty easy because when you see three that are connected, that are close contacts to each other, that's usually a trigger of a spread.
Yep.
In the school, it gets a little bit trickier because you're vastly different and the connections could be family or other things. So that's why we like to dig into those pieces and see a little bit further. So that's why whenever we ask we want a number, we're always kind of very hesitant because those conversations are so organic to each case that you just can't say yes or no. My answer to you is we would definitely investigate, and we would have the nurses of those buildings at the meeting with us, and we would be talking about what it looks like. And I'll tell you, our nurses do not hesitate to say, mask them. Like they're very supportive of that process. So
Because I guess one of the things I'm thinking about is like in the spring, we saw in the high school, there was just widespread transmission. And whether it was happening in the building or at social events outside of school or at concerts, like it was happening, so like because we were having, well, yeah, definitely prom. So, like we're seeing such widespread transmission, like that was a case in which it's like, you're not necessarily going to connect those cases together very easily because people aren't going to necessarily know where they caught it.
Right.
But it was leading to such a high degree of absences. So like, I feel like student absence levels might need to be something that's considered in this, right?
Right, and we do look at those also. Yeah. I will say we've gone through phases with mask, right? The phase where we didn't want to wear it, to the phase where we're wearing it, to the phase we don't want to take it off, to the phase where we're recommended to wear it. I think we're not comfortable with that. I've been in the high school where I've seen pictures where over 50% of the students were wearing masks, so it's not a thing anymore.
Right.
It's okay, right? So highly recommending, I think, is really effective way to go in most cases.
Because it's a signal that people listen to.
Right, right.
Laurel? Or Gretchen, I'm sorry, I took your place.
Is yours on, mine's a different topic.
Go ahead.
Okay. So I had one comment, which is that, and Amber's comment triggered it in me, and I think many board members have already heard me say this, but, because COVID's here to stay, it does seem like whatever we can do to keep adults in the building so that we don't have to close the doors.
We're thinking the same thing.
Yeah, and I mean, I know it's all in the safety, all the layered mitigation, but gosh, that seems like that's the one thing that could really just shut the whole thing down, is if you don't have enough adults in the building, then the kids can't be there. So, I just had to say it out loud. I don't know, that's all.
I heard
And
you.
then I had a question. So within the safety plan, I read all about ventilation and, let's try and keep the windows open and everything's at high capacity for the HVAC. And I'm wondering, and that's all good, and we've been doing that, and, we're supposed to. And then I know Mr. Fisher talked about CO2 monitors at the last CAC for facilities meeting, and I don't think there's been another one since then?
I think
Yes.
There has been, okay.
Yeah,
And
this past week.
Pardon?
There was this past week.
I thought so, but I found out about it after the fact, and then I couldn't find an email, or it's not in the calendar either. So I thought I would just ask, now, the specifics of CO2 monitoring is not in the safety plan, is that correct?
Are you looking at me or him?
Anybody who might know the answer?
No.
No, okay. So then I was wondering is that just too detailed to be in the safety plan? Because it seems like air is how people get this, and so we'd want to know if the air ventilation is better or worse, and if we can make it better, we'd want to make it better, that's all, because that's how you get this virus. So,
Air change rate?
yeah, like air exchange rate per hour per room or whatever, and then the CO2 monitors that I know, Mike, you had been talking about before, and apparently in the last meeting that I didn't know happened.
Sure.
And anyway, so what, can you just tell us, like, how you see that fitting into the safety plan, even though it's not documented in there?
Sure. The maximization of outside air while still being able to maintain temperatures and humidity levels that are appropriate predated me. So all we wanted to do was validate. So that's what we're doing. So we are putting random CO2 monitors that we rented. We're still compiling all that data. It's a lot of data, so we're still trying to figure that out. And then once we kind of have that data, it will help guide us to be able to adjust if we need to, as far as the programming of the automation systems, if we can.
So it's still part of the ventilation system then?
Yes, yeah, I mean, it's
So
the,
it's kind of in there, it's just another piece that and it's not every building?
no, so we have real-time monitoring in many of the buildings in the classrooms, so we were spot checking classrooms that we did not have real-time monitoring. That's basically what we were doing. So we're just validating that CO2 levels are not reaching a point to where we feel they'd be detrimental. And if they do, we'll make adjustments. So that's what we're doing. We're validating that the outside air is in fact enough.
And then, like, there's an alarm system, right? At least on some of the CO2
Sure.
monitors?
So we went ahead and set up an email alarm system proactively so that if levels do rise to a point to where we feel there's a detriment, then I get an email. And that kind of alerts us and say, hey, something's wrong, right? A damper's not opening, a fan has faulted, something, right? So it lets us react much faster.
Yeah, I just thought I'd bring it up because I think that, going into the fall, a lot of families take comfort in that, knowing that the air exchange rates are being looked at, that the CO2 monitoring is happening, there's an alarm system, and just that we want people to know that because it helps them, I think, feel better about sending their kids back to school in the fall. So
Sure.
I apologize that I was unaware of that last meeting, but I really appreciate that, you just spoke about it in this meeting. And that's what I was thinking, Jean, is that it's kind of part of the ventilation topic within the safety plan. And so let's go ahead and let people know that it's happening. So anyway, okay, thank you.
Sure.
I have
Okay,
one.
thanks. Question?
Well, actually, I mean, it was yours, but you didn't bring it up. So,
Okay.
um,
Is it the outside stuff?
Yeah.
Okay,
Well, partly.
go for it.
So, just one consideration, and I know a numerical threshold is not easy necessarily to put on this, and so I'm not asking for one, but I would encourage and would, in the board speak, I would like to see consideration for large group gatherings. I'll be honest, I felt it was a misstep that certain band concerts and things were held at the end of the year when we were at high levels, and we know that there was transmission there because musicians turned around and had massive outbreaks. So, I mean, I think it behooves us to take a lesson learned from those experiences, and that if we are having any real spread, to consider that if we are constrained to an indoor gathering for an assembly or a concert or performance or something else, that because the large groups and the confined spaces, that, it's just good common sense that we but that we say, this is a masking event. You know what I mean? To what extent is appropriate for the audience when we're putting a large number of people in a room together? Like, as we're saying, this is the way we'll probably need to live life from now on. I would never go to a conference, probably for the next decade, without wearing a mask, and I don't know how many people would. So I think, and trying to utilize outdoors whenever possible. We've said that, but I don't know that we've really seen consistent action on that in all buildings by all people. So I think it needs to be a practice we consider. And I think, to your point, Jean, I think I'm happy to share it. There's a really good article that I had shared with a couple community members towards the end of last spring, written by a respiratory virologist, and he was talking about respiratory disease. And it was an opinion piece, but basically what it said is what you're getting at is that we need to learn to shift our mindset to strategic masking. There will be times where it will be to our best interest and be smart to mask. Like, I'm dealing with some health issues, so I'm masking because the last thing I want is to get COVID on top of some health issues. Or like when I was traveling in the spring, the last thing I wanted to do was get COVID right before I had, went on my vacation. So, and also obviously if cases are ticking up, then that's a strategic time to mask and hopefully prevent yourself from getting sick and keep these smaller surges that we have at a lower level. So I would just encourage us to actually articulate things about large indoor gatherings and the need to be outdoors if at all possible, and that indoor gatherings are most certainly a time we want to say mask, no matter what, that masking is highly recommended, and there may be some cases if we're dealing with an uptick of cases that we actually want to require them as for large gatherings, because there's just, when you're putting that many people in a room, you're just increasing the possibility and probability of transmission.
Sure. Of course, so you want it in the plan somewhere that basically says when there's large indoor gatherings to encourage masking and when they're, and to be outside as much as possible.
Yeah, I
Okay.
think that's smart. You know, this whole document is not a contract, but a way for to build trust with the community about what safe decisions we're going to make.
Sure.
And also have a way to hold one another accountable that we're all making good decisions. So I think if it's articulated in the document, you know, then staff and other people understand that, like, this is our plan, this is the way we're going to function.
Yep, for sure. No problem.
Yeah, I think that's the, you know, to take those precautions and like normalizing going outdoors when we can. I think we need to get to a point where we're just normalizing that, because, you know, if it can help prevent a lot of student absences, that's really worthwhile. And staff absences, obviously, yeah. And I agree about, you know, trying, like, the tipping point for when we need to mask in large gatherings might be lower than the tipping point for other situations.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to get at, that tipping.
And then field trips, I think, are another,
Yeah,
like,
closed
students getting on
buses.
buses to go on a field trip for 2 hours is potentially also a little different situation that's higher risk. And I know we made a different decision, you know, we had decided to require masking there in the spring, so. So I don't know if there's a way to put some wording in about, that there's maybe particular situations and events where we're going to treat higher risk events differently.
Yeah, I think we could do that.
Just to let you know that that's going to be a little difficult, especially when we have, I'm thinking of sporting events, where we have people coming outside our district into our areas.
Oh, I hadn't thought of those.
Sporting will be tricky, at least most fall
Yeah.
sports are outside except for volleyball, so we'll be, I
Right.
learned so much about athletics during this process.
Yeah.
But we can encourage masking inside though, so.
Right.
Yeah, I guess I'm thinking a lot more, I understand that we can only control what we can control, and that's, you know, our community. But I think utilizing those opportunities to minimize risk makes a lot of sense.
Encouraging it as much as possible.
Where it's feasible to do so, yeah. Laurel, did you have your hand raised?
Yeah, and this goes back to, I was sort of alluding to it earlier with the virtual. Last year, the last 2 years, we've had both the health and safety plan and then the educational plan, and I'm not, and sometimes there was an overlap of what was where. So this tags sort of onto what was being, what Gretchen was talking about. One of my concerns all along had been the staff numbers, because I think there were times when staff numbers dropped, and so yes, children were in school, but there were a whole bunch of them together because we had supervision issues and all, and whether it's in here or whether it's just, you know, saying something to Mr. Johnson, that you might need to, you know, you might want board direction or something, but I wanted to state that that is something that as we go into the next year, I would like some way for us to be aware of and to have a way to let parents know or let our community to be aware of that, because it is, there are issues involved when there are not enough adults there, and hopefully that would be an encouragement to adults to keep themselves to the best that they can, healthy. So I don't know if it goes in here.
Like on the dashboard, like where you
Yeah,
get
something
staff
like
cases
that.
are not broken out though, they're just
To know
within
what
the
teachers
building.
are absent, or,
I think that's going to be difficult because
yeah. Because it's not so
Smaller
much the absence of the
schools.
teachers, it's the number of substitutes.
Yeah.
And if
Right.
we don't have
Right,
enough
well, oh yeah,
substitutes,
I mean,
that's where-
well, that's why I may have said teachers, but I meant staff. If we're below whatever, I don't know what the percentage is that you really need to run a building. And I heard that concern from parents at different times, as well as from staff members who felt like they were really stretched, covering for low numbers. I don't know what to do about it, but it is a concern, and I wanted to bring it up as we look forward into the new year, you know, into the new school year.
And that was a lot to do with just the sub shortages that we have, not,
And with people
it-
having to isolate
yeah.
when they might not have even been
Yeah.
sick and.
yeah, but it was a combination of things.
Yes.
So we're hoping that we won't have those issues with our substitutes and people coming back to work and replenishing those supplies. And
Dan?
Yeah. I appreciate all the thought and concern that's coming from everywhere about these issues. And I appreciate particularly the reflection on the part of other board members about the infectious side of this pandemic and trying to, as with a lot of wisdom now after 2 years, it seems that we have a pretty good idea about how this disease can impact our schools and can reduce opportunities. So it's important that we stay on top of this as much as possible. I'll change the focus a little bit. I was going through the health and safety plan, some of the program recommendations that were in here. I spoke with Mr. Johnson about one of these things just earlier today, but I just want to be clear that that about among the things that are being recommended that we will have in terms of the middle schools anyway, we'll have an additional quasi-administrator to assist with behavioral needs on the part of students in terms of an additional dean of students for each middle school. So it would be not quite an assistant principal, but someone more at that level. So we'll have 3 administrators in each middle school compared to the present circumstance, which involves 2. Also, there's a description or a reference to someone called a behavior specialist. And when Mr. Johnson and I talked about it, because in reading this earlier, it occurred to me that this can sometimes refer to people who have an ABA, Applied Behavior Analyst training. And they really are immersed in behavioral intervention and the needs of kids with behavior problems. But Mr. Johnson was saying it's not going to be like that. It sounds like more like an instructional coach for management, classroom management, a way of thinking of it, perhaps. Am I not on
yeah, we're calling it a behavioral interventionist that basically focuses on student classroom management, student management,
Right.
behavioral stuff. So
Management
plans.
behavior plans.
Okay. So I guess the only, and this is just and I was discussing this earlier, the only cautionary thing I have about this is making sure there's a really strong conceptual, empirical foundation for the support that these staff are receiving. That somebody who comes out of a traditional instructional program, for example, may know a lot about intervening with kids, but when you have kids who have unique behavioral needs, they can rise above your everyday experience of working as a classroom teacher. And the more I think I would be inclined, and I would just sort of aligning with some of the other suggestions coming from other members of the board, I would really actively encourage everyone involved with these individuals to consider defining the role, consider the behavioral assessment practices they'll be involved with, classroom observations, among many, many others. And also in terms of the interventions that they do as evidence-based as possible, and involving other members of the team and those kinds of things, whether it's a counselor, school psychologist, special educator. I mean, a lot of people who do this kind of work, but trying to make sure that if they're coming out of the classroom, there's some catching up that they'll need to be doing. So that's my own suggestion about it, because it's a pretty challenging role. So that's all.
Okay. Right, anything else on the health and safety plan? So this will come back to us for a vote at the next board meeting, is that the plan?
I'm not sure it needs to be voted. I'll defer to Curtis on that, does it? I think we already.
I thought that was the SRP.
But here it says, the last page has a place where it says it was approved by a vote of,
Well, I think that was the initial, and so that needs to come back every 6 months for a review, and so I think this was a review. And I think that piece just is attached to it's actually just attached to that document.
Oh.
So that's still the same template that we got last year. and we're
Oh,
supposed
so
to
it's not
use it for-
requiring us
Right, and so
to-
we don't have to do a new one every year. It's just every 6 months we need to come back and review it.
I see.
Yeah.
And do we like need to file this then with some?
Right.
Okay.
Yes, yes.
Got it.
Yeah.
So it doesn't actually need.
So bye.
No, that's okay. I was just confused because the page was on.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
So Lynn's off the hook. No roll call vote required.
Okay. Well, not tonight anyway. Like, I mean, it wouldn't have been tonight because we didn't put it on as an action item tonight. Yeah.
And
Okay.
I'll look to incorporate some of the suggestions, and it'll be live, so you'll be able to see that.
Okay.
Okay.
So do you think like whenever you have it like posted, you could just send the board an email to let us know
For sure.
when it's posted?
It's not going to go, what's the date of live? I think it's August 15th, so we have some time, but we'll have it updated, I'm sure, by
Great.
the end of this week, so we can make sure it's captured what you were thinking was and feedback.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Yep, sure.
Okay, so then moving on, actually, let's just do a 10-minute, maybe 5-minute restroom break before we move on to the capital project update. So we'll take a short adjournment and reconvene. Okay?
You didn't finish the.
It's your because you did the. Do you know you did that?
And all these courses of what I sent, because they could. On them, wide open.
It's your 10-second warning. Okay.
I believe it.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting back to order. Moving on to item B, under information discussion, we have the capital project update, and this is shown in attachment 7B.
Thank you. At the combined meeting of Finance and Facilities and Grounds last week, we went through much of this information in great detail. There's just been a couple minor updates that we wanted to share, and based upon new information and/or some feedback that we had from the from that presentation last week. So, just for the public and any of those individuals that were not at that committee meeting, the purpose of this communication is to provide you an update regarding the planning that has taken place since that meeting last week. This discussion relates to renovations to the North Building and Mount Nittany Elementary, which you should see some requests for work in the very near future at some of your meetings. Additionally, we will have discussions about future plans for the Fairmont Building, potential renovation to the Panorama Village Building, and then the Park Forest Middle School project. Funding for these projects will be addressed. That we did have some information here, but in the future we'll have more detailed information. Specifically related to the North Building, there was I guess there's a lot of questions about North. We haven't done enough tours of the North Building, it sounds like, as of late. And so I hope that many of you are very familiar with the high school. In fact, I've done a couple tours this summer, as well as some other administrators. And just to give you a little bit of feedback, much positive feedback received from the various groups. But if you look at the slide that I have presented, which is on page 5 of the attachment, so here's the north turf, obviously the north parking lot, which was of great discussion at the State College Borough Council and Planning Commission meetings.
Yep.
This is the parking lot that is closest to the Delta section of the North Building. Obviously over here is the natatorium and athletics area, and this is where some of the renovations have been occurring. Back here would be some additional locker room spaces, food service, the data center for instructional services, IT services. The area here with this that has the darker roof, that's the area where we're talking about the renovations that the former CTC shops. And so this road is Logan Avenue that comes off of South Atherton Street. And that does, when school is not in session, it does connect to Westerly Parkway. There is a small gravel road that goes behind the building here. And there's also some storage sheds. And you can go around to, I'm losing battery here. So we'll need to move quickly. But that's the graphic that I wanted to share with you to give you an idea. So does that answer or create any new questions specifically about the location we're talking about?
I'm just curious if you can show us where the location is that we were talking earlier about.
Team rooms?
Yes.
Team rooms are going to be in this section of the building.
Okay. Because you said locker rooms, and I haven't figured out if they're the same.
Okay. I'm
Thank you.
sorry. I was
That's
just
okay. That's fine.
talking about one versus the other. But
That's
no,
fine.
from this diagram, we can't show you the specifics.
Because it's down inside, yes.
Yes.
I get that.
Okay?
Okay.
So, just a couple additional highlights. There are no Plan-Con funds. You approved Plan-Con submission earlier for the high school and the 3 elementary projects. There are no Plan-Con funds available right now for these renovations. Again, just reiterating that there is a small Mount Nittany Elementary renovation project that we will be bringing forth for approval in the very near future. Because the plan at this time for the North building renovation would take, the majority of that space would be taken up by IT services. So they would be vacating their space in Panorama. And then there would be some small renovations to that space to allow for some people have called it a pupil services area, special education, student services, equity, and the like, federal programs and gifted as well. Then, much to my chagrin, I have not been able to coordinate interviews for the facilities assessment enrollment projections with the consultants and the board member. Other priorities have kept me from doing that, but hopefully that will be very, very soon. Out of that, with our enrollments, most recently the last year and this coming year for Mount Nittany L, there may need to be a project there, but we need to understand where our vacancies are in our buildings and then where our students are projected to be housed. Park Forest Middle School is on our radar, as well as I mentioned, vacating or future plans for the Fairmont building. And then again, capital funding will be mentioned. It's rare that I have good news. I understand that, it's part of the position. But I believe that I have some very good news for all of you. We did finalize plans today that one of the 5th grade classes will be going back to Mount Nittany L. That will cause the boardroom to become vacant, and we will be able to return, if not the last meeting in August, to the first meeting in September for board meetings, committee meetings, and other administrative meetings that we need to have in the district. So we're very excited about that. We appreciate College Township's flexibility with us, and they're inviting us and allowing us to be here, but we will be able to be back on our own campus in Panorama Village in the very near future.
Great.
So. So are there any questions? Again, I'm not planning to go through the memo in detail because that was done last week in committee, but if there are, and the information is available, but if there's any other questions or comments, we'll be happy to take those at this time. Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Fisher obviously is very integral to this, and Mrs. Watson is still in the back as well with the finances. So thank you very much, and have a great evening.
Thank you.
So we'll try to schedule some time to get a chance to see those spaces, right?
In the North Building? Yeah, depending on I would prefer to do that before school comes back in session.
Yeah.
And if we can time it for the next committee meeting, which, just for the record, we've moved facilities to join finance again in August on the 10th. If the building is in a situation that we can accommodate that because of the renovations, we will do so. If not, we'll schedule another time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so moving on to committee reports then. So policy committee, Amy, did you have a report from Jackie,
I'm just trying to remember.
I mean, I read the minutes, I'm sure we all read the minutes.
Yeah, I mean,
so
that pretty well
it sounds like we were
covered.
generally covering the handbooks.
Yeah, we talked a lot about the handbooks and some of the changes there and dress code and things like that.
All right. Okay, culture, climate, and learning, Dan?
Yeah, we had a discussion, actually a pretty thorough review of the restorative practices component and how it aligns with the concerns that we're trying to address in terms of behavior and discipline, and talked about the system itself in terms of how it is really intended to, the restorative practices system is designed to do a number of different things. One is to build community within classrooms and also within schools, but it's also designed to provide support for kids who have behavioral needs in terms of providing both support for those students and also a certain amount of direction and control. And there's a matrix for that in terms of helping to understand how this all works. But we had a pretty in-depth review. There's a really nice PowerPoint that was part of that presentation, which is on board docs if you want to walk back to it. The discussion around those topics involved, among other things, the terminology and language that is used, and the use of the word, for example, the term shame came up as being one of the terms that's used within the restorative practices model, but how it might be better replaced with something called reintegrative accountability, perhaps another way of acknowledging that the term shame in other contexts, not in terms of the restorative practices model, but in terms of other contexts, has some negative connotations. So we talked about
And
that
results.
a bit. And we also talked about out-of-school suspension at the elementary level, and acknowledging that on occasion it's necessary when there's a safety, a fundamental safety concern. And I was asking, well, when would we ever do that for a young child? And apparently there are circumstances where there's no other option than out-of-school suspension for certain students, but it's something obviously to be avoided at all costs in terms of using the resources that we can. We also talked about the importance of having some language perhaps in the system that refers to the importance of parent engagement, parent participation in these activities. That's just crucial, that thinking about setting expectations for children in our schools is aligned with and needs to be encouraged, supported by the families of those students. So we can't just assume that we can just manage all those things at the school level. We actively have to be engaged with families and inviting families to participate in this work with us. So, that was essentially, I mean, those are some of the highlights that I could take from it. There are other issues as well, which are in the memo, in the minutes, but for now, I think that I can leave it at that.
Good, thank you. Okay, so moving on to facilities and grounds and the finance. Peter, do you want to sum up that meeting?
Yeah, we already had a discussion about the coming capital
Capital plan.
projects, so I don't think I need to recap any of that. We had a discussion about the state budget and where those monies are going, so don't need to touch that. And then the introduction of a climate policy, a climate action resolution that contained potential for action in professional development related to climate change and sustainability, in conducting a greenhouse gas inventory for the district and what that would entail for our staff and what all would go into it for analysis. The setting of targets related to greenhouse gas emissions and what the timescales would be for those and what the courses of action would be. We had a discussion too about whether a resolution is the proper course of action, whether it should feed into other policy, how that ought to be structured. And I mean, there was no decision made at that committee, but surely it will come back after to respond to all those questions and see what happens next. That's all.
So that should probably be on the next committee agenda as well then.
Yeah, I would say it would be on the next facilities and grounds committee meeting. Yeah.
Sounds good. So looking forward to upcoming meetings. On the 26th, there is a CCL meeting at 10:30. That will be at Panorama Village. And we have scheduled right now the August 10th meeting of Facilities and Grounds and Finance at noon, also at Panorama Village. Just as a note, all of our committee meetings have now moved back to the Panorama building for the foreseeable future. So,
Amber, excuse me. I just wanted to mention if anyone's looking for the Communications Committee meeting that was originally scheduled for this coming Wednesday.
right.
We have that has been moved to August 19th.
Right, okay,
So
thank
just
you.
because it was this week, I wanted to make sure if someone was looking for it.
Great. Yes, so if anybody has items for that, we'll
Definitely.
yeah, okay. All right, so our next regular meeting is August 8th. And with that, I will be looking for a motion to adjourn to executive session.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. All in favor of adjourning? Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, we are adjourned then.